They say this is important, that we set this out, that this caveat exists, but there are many who say, leave it as it is. Let's just adopt the full definition with all examples, because any other attempts to bring any separate clauses will simply undermine this whole process. The process that is attempting to try and regain the trust and to try and move Labour on from this round, because let's face it, anti-Semitism has not left Labour throughout the whole summer. It was meant to be a summer where Labour could really start attacking the government, putting forward its own policies, its own proposals, particularly in the face of these difficult months with Brexit, and yet anti-Semitism hasn't gone away. So all eyes on this meeting here at Labour central headquarters in London. Jeremy Corbyn himself is expected to come here. He has the biggest job of all, really, to try and bring together his party. Can he bring both sides, both splits, the schisms within his party, to try and unite them? As I say, to try and show that Labour is going to fully adopt the definitions and in doing so, unite the party in terms of what will need to be done ahead of a very, very busy couple of months in Parliament.
OK, Laura, thanks very much for that. Well, joining us from Westminster is the Jeremy Corbyn supporter and former Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, who resigned from the Labour Party earlier this year over his suspension for alleged anti-Semitism. Mr Livingstone, what should the Labour Party do today?
Well, if you actually look at what we just saw on Sky, Chris Williamson, the Labour MP, that's the first time on any media I've seen the issue come up that the man who drafted this statement that defines anti-Semitism, the American lawyer who is Jewish himself, Kenneth Stern, says he now regrets that the wording of some of the examples he's included has restricted freedom of speech when you're discussing the state of Israel. So if they do include all of those poorly worded examples, we've got to make absolutely sure that people aren't then disciplined for simply stating historical facts or having an honest and open debate.
But isn't this also about sending a message about inclusivity to the Jewish community, many of whom feel that the Labour Party doesn't speak for them anymore? And the fact is that so many Jewish leaders have written to express their displeasure about this and their concern about these 4 points. Isn't it irrelevant what the man who wrote it all those years ago thinks now? Isn't it about how it's been interpreted over the years and what it means to the Jewish community?
As long as it's interpreted in a way that doesn't prevent people having an honest and open debate about the policies of the Israeli government. But you see, what I find remarkable about all of this is that we had 80 Jewish Labour Party members publish a letter when this row erupted saying that in all their centuries together in the Labour Party, none of them had ever heard or seen anything anti-Semitic. Now, I was talking to a senior party official just before I resigned. He was saying that out of 500,000 members, they found about 50 that have tweeted something anti-Semitic. Now, that's 1 out of every 10,000. The simple fact is, if you're anti-Semitic or homophobic or racist, you're not going to join the Labour Party, because people like Jeremy and myself have spent our entire political careers challenging every form of discrimination.
Do you think that's true, really? I mean, goodness me, to suggest that nobody in the Labour Party is anti-Semitic or racist seems an extraordinary claim. I mean, you couldn't say that about any political party, could you? You know, people have political views, but they may still be flawed in other ways. You know, just because somebody believes in a lot of Labour policies doesn't mean that they won't necessarily be racist, sexist or homophobic.
Well, as I said, they've found about 50 Labour Party members who've tweeted something anti-Semitic out of over 500,000. So that, you know, when you actually look at the last poll I saw, showed that about 9% of people in Britain had some anti-Semitic views, which is much lower than the European average. I think you just look at my 8 years as mayor. Anti-Semitic incidents were cut by 50%. Then under Boris Johnson, they more than doubled, because I spent my 8 years as mayor preaching tolerance between different faiths, different races. I worked with the Jewish leadership to stage Jewish events, just as we did Muslim and Hindu and Sikh events. And if you are doing that, I'd be prepared to bet you now 100 quid that once we get a Jeremy Corbyn government, by the end of that government, anti-Semitism, racism, homophobia will all have declined quite significantly.
Well, it's a big hope, isn't it? But there are many Labour critics of Israel. You know, we heard from Aisha Hazarika a short while ago. Stephen Kinnock was talking on the radio this morning. He says he has never been constrained by these definitions in his forthright and very clear criticism of Israeli government policies. Why does the Labour Party feel the need to almost attach a codicil? You know, as Arika pointed out, that she felt it was like a finger being held up to Jewish Labour members when it was unnecessary. There is nothing in this which stops you making legitimate criticisms of Israel whenever you want to.
Well, yeah, but as I said earlier, the lawyer who drafted this admits and he regrets that it's actually been curtailing honest and open debate. So we mustn't do that. And the simple fact is, I think some of the most strong critics of Israel that I've ever met are Jewish themselves. Some of them have been Israelis. So it's not anti-Semitic to criticise Israeli government policy about their mistreatment of the Palestinians. But when you get people tweeting about, you know, big-nosed Jews and a global conspiracy that they're running the world, those people anyone like that should just be kicked out of the Labour Party. And under our new General Secretary, they will.
Indeed, but those people, you know, the current definitions, if the Labour Party was to accept all the definitions, I mean, they don't, that wouldn't be affected by that. Those abhorrent statements aren't included because they're just not included. Yeah. That's an irrelevance almost, isn't it?
Well, I just think we don't want to be in a position where somebody ends up being suspended for having made a legitimate criticism of Israel. So if we do accept this definition in exactly the way it's been poorly drafted, actually, is honest. I think we've got to be absolutely clear that our disciplinary machine inside the Labour Party is absolutely clear about how you interpret it. I mean, don't forget, I was suspended by the Labour Party General Secretary on the allegation I'd said Hitler was a Zionist. And 2.5 years later, I'm still seeing that lie repeated in The Guardian, the Financial Times, The Observer, on the Huffington Post website. Only in all this time since then, not a single journalist has ever phoned me to say, did you actually say Hitler was a Zionist? Not once.
Did you?
Of course not. How could anyone say a man who loathed Jews all his life was a Zionist? I mean, the simple fact is, I referred to the fact that in 1933, the German Zionists signed a deal with Hitler's government in which they collaborated on moving 60,000 German Jews to live in Palestine. OK, we're not going to
do tinker around over history. I know, it's a long time ago, and let's not go into it all now. I mean, we're talking about the Labour Party in the present at the moment. Briefly, before you go, do you think we're going to see the formation of a new centrist party here? Do you think that this row has fractured the Labour Party so greatly that it's irreparable? Or do you think the party can come together? 80%
of MPs tried to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn, but then we did so dramatically better than anyone hoped at the general election. The vast majority of Labour MPs have got behind Jeremy. There's a handful of embittered old Blairites. If they defect...
including Frank Field?
Well, Frank Field... I think the issue about Frank Field was he voted to prop up Theresa May's government. And if those half a dozen Labour MPs had voted with the Labour Party, that motion would have been carried. Theresa May have been forced out. There may have been a general election. And therefore, people are very angry in his party and in the parties of the others MPs who did that they've allowed Theresa May's government to continue in office. That's what that's about.
Do you think there'll be more resignations in the party?
I think not, because... the simple fact is, you look at what happened back in 1981 when some of the most prominent politicians in Britain, Roy Jenkins and 3 or 4 others, all set off to form the SDP. And 2 years later, it was just wiped out at the election. The simple fact is the vast majority of Brits are either behind the Tory party or the Labour Party, because these are the only 2 effective parties likely to form a government.
OK. Good to talk to you, Ken Livingstone. Thank you for your time.
Mother